John Mayer, maybe, I think would be.
Oh, yeah. But he's no Fernando Alonso, is he?
No, certainly not.
Steiner's more valuable than the entire Red Bull organization, isn't he?
The one thing we've never had here is rain, and there is a bit of rain in the air for Sunday as well. So imagine Baku wet. I mean, that's going to be crazy.
And why did I go with the reserve driver? Oh, I botched this. Hello and welcome to another episode of Unlapped. Katie George, Nate Saunders, Laurence Edmondson. Race week has finally arrived. Laurence is on the ground in Baku. First things first. Have you seen Taylor Swift? Yes or no?
Not yet. I've only been here, kind of a day really, but no sightings of Taylor Swift, but no sightings of Fernando Alonso. So I'm not going to rule it out just yet. But no, not yet. She was at the US Grand Prix several years ago. I think that was the last sighting of Taylor Swift I had. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
And only one, or have you sighted her multiple times in your life?
No, the last and once sighting, was
Fair enough.
The US Grand Prix. I think it was around 2018, 2019 she played there.
Yeah, it was 18 because it was when they messed all the schedule up, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. There you go.
And if you've been
a much bigger fan than me, I should say, so he's the guy to go.
That's true.
For the latest of Taylor Swift news.
Well, I've enjoyed doing the memes. To be honest with you, it's been a good way to pass that third week of the break. And I didn't think we're coming up to a year anniversary of this pod, aren't we? Didn't think we'd be celebrating it talking about Taylor Swift and Fernando Alonso. So what a joy to be getting to that milestone with.
Yeah, if you're living under a rock, the rumors have taken the F1 and pop culture communities by storm. Is that newly single Taylor Swift and Fernando Alonso may or may not be dating. Fact or fiction? Laurence is clearly going to get to the bottom of it while he is in Baku, which means you're going to be pulling double duty. Race weekend and obviously dating scene. Very, very important. Of course, you'll get that information right here on Unlapped. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, like this video, leave us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to ESPN for more F1 content. And if you're listening, hit us with a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Let's get to some real news, shall we? As expected, the new sprint format has officially been approved, and we will see it happening in just a couple of days in Baku. We've talked about this sprint format that was proposed by, we think, brainchild Gunther Steiner from Haas, but it seems like a lot of team bosses were very receptive of it. Stefano Domenicali certainly has been vocal about maybe changing the format, and so we will see it in formation this weekend at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Do we like the change now that it is official? Laurence, you first.
I do like it because it's essentially adding a mini weekend into a shortened weekend. So if you remember a few years back, I think it was 2020 at Imola, they just had one practice session, qualifying and the race. And that's essentially what we've got now, except for the practice session and the qualifying happen on Friday. The race happens on Sunday. And then in between, you have your own little tiny race, a sprint race. So I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. I felt with it kind of setting the grid, there was a lot at stake, and you did feel that some drivers maybe held back a bit. I mean, there were plenty of examples where they didn't, but I think there was that fear always that they would hold back. And I think it just kind of, it makes it its own little event. And sprint races, I'm not against. I'd much rather turn up to a race weekend and have 3 days of solid action rather than a lot of practicing and then qualifying in the race. So I'm all up for it. I don't think it's going to work everywhere. I don't think it's a case that it should be rolled out at all 23 races. But at the moment, we have 6 races like this, and I think that's a good balance.
Nate, how do you feel like it'll change the racing and the strategy for teams moving forward?
Yeah, I think seeing it play out in real time this weekend is going to be genuinely, really fascinating, because I don't think anybody really has a clear idea of how that's going to be. I mean, I think Laurence is right. There were clear examples of drivers holding back before. There's much more at stake now. It's weird in a way because I think they've flipped around where people might hold back, because previously, if it set the grid, there was a reason to fight for kind of every position. It's like, well, if I gain a position here, it's one step up the grid. If you're kind of 12th down, this would be my only criticism of it. I'm a big fan of it otherwise. If you're kind of 12th down in that sprint, I wonder if your team, especially at a place like Baku, might just say, well, look, there's high risk and zero reward here, because if you finish 13th or 14th or 12th, has no impact on the rest of the weekend. But obviously, if you just put a wheel wrong at turn one, you could end up in the wall. You could damage your car and whatever. So I wonder what that's going to do to the people at the back of the field, and whether there'll be kind of a game of chicken of like people saying, well, look, if you want to retire from this, feel free. We're going to stay in. So that might be fascinating as well. And that's what I mean. There's a lot of parts to it that you can't really predict. So, and the best thing about the whole thing is, I think the shortened qualifying, hopefully, because it's shorter Q3, there might only be time for one lap. If that can mix the grids up, I think that really is the key to the whole sprint format. If Max is starting from first every single time we have a sprint race, kind of is going to get a bit repetitive. But if there's situations where Max is kind of even having to fight from fourth or fifth, I mean, the best sprint race we've had was when Lewis started at the back in Brazil in 21. He had to fight his way forward, and then he did this, did the same in the race. So if they can find that kind of balance, I think it'll be really good. But I love that Formula One's kind of, they've listened to fans, they've looked at what works, what doesn't, and they've kind of made a change. So we'll see. It's had a bit of a mixed reaction, which I'm surprised about, but I think there's still a lot of people that are against the concept rather than the format of the sprints. I think they just don't want to see sprints happen. But I'm a big fan of them, like Laurence. I mean, we joke sometimes. You go to some circuits, turn up on a Friday, and you're like, oh, there's just nothing really exciting about today, because we don't really get a huge amount of media on Friday either. So you're kind of just there, and not really a huge amount to do. So yeah, it's added that dimension. I think Baku, I know Christian Horner would disagree with me, but Baku's a great pick for this first one. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Okay, to that point, Laurence, do you feel like Baku is a conducive circuit for a sprint format?
So Baku, you kind of get one thing or another. You either get a processional race because the cars will split out. They have that very tight middle sector, and it tends to string the cars out, and then they have the long straights, which, they kind of work for overtaking, but you need the cars to be close together, and that middle sector tends to ruin it. So you can have that. But if something sparks off a good race, then you do get something. Now, I think that's more likely to happen over a full race distance than a sprint race distance. I'm not sure a sprint race will be quite long enough, because we've certainly had a kind of third of a race go by in Baku and not much happen, and then it all kicks off later in the race. So, I think it's a place where things do happen, but is it guaranteed? No. Is there a danger that we come away from this and we actually have two fairly processional races? Yes. But I don't think that should then be a negative towards this format, and I don't think that should really kind of stand as a black mark against it. I think it's got potential, certainly at races where there's more overtaking opportunities. So hopefully we'll see that later in the year. Even if this sprint race doesn't work out, we'll see that later in the year at other ones.
Yeah, and when there's a processional Grand Prix, no one says, well, we need to change the format because there's been one processional race, so I feel like you need to give it a bit of time.
Which is a really good point. Something else that has turned some heads, according to Red Bull and Christian Horner, multiple teams have breached the cost cap. He believes last year in an F1 commission meeting that some of the teams said, we will break the cost cap, quote, we will break it. Laurence, what do you make of these allegations from Red Bull's team boss?
Well, Red Bull said something fairly similar last year, I seem to remember. In fact, they went as far as saying certain teams wouldn't be able to finish the season because they'd literally run out of money and wouldn't be able to turn up to races. Now, of course, that wasn't the case. Now, whether they went over the budget cap doing that, I don't know. But we're talking about the one team that did break the budget cap in the first year of it being there. And so I take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But it is possible. Look, I mean, the budget cap was reduced last year, and there were a lot of things that increased costs, energy costs back at factories. The whole world, I think, felt that to some extent. The cost of moving stuff around the world also increased. So there were a number of things which would indicate that, yeah, there's a danger that a number of teams have gone over it. I think if it is the case that 6 teams have gone over it, and I honestly do not know either way, I don't think we're going to find out for sure until the FIA release the findings of the investigations, which are hoping to do much earlier this year than they did last year. But it's possible. But have they done it? I don't know. And if 6 teams have done it, then it's really, what does that say? It says that actually probably the budget cap was set too low for the costs that were involved in racing last year.
Do you think that it's reflective that the FIA's punishment, Nate, of Red Bull a year ago was not severe enough, if in fact this many teams have gone over?
Well, I think that's a fair way of certainly of kind of framing that. I think Horner's kind of coming from the point of view that he's always wanted the cost cap to expand, but he did talk to one team boss last year in Austin when the suggestion was going to be when we first heard about the wind tunnel penalty, and the kind of suggestion was it was like, well, that's actually not if you can gain enough to kind of win a championship by overspending, which I'm not saying Red Bull did that because that's what some people inferred. They said if that is what you can do off the back of it, then it's not a bad penalty. But of course, Red Bull argued it wasn't anything they gained on track from. So I think there is that feeling there. But I think also teams, if you ask any team right now, are you going to break the budget? They'll probably say, yeah, we're right on the limit, because that's just kind of how F1 works. So it's not surprising to me that they're saying that. And they're probably saying that as well, partly to kind of say to the other teams, like, hey, we're spending right on the limit, right on the budget. We're developing as much as we can within reason. So if I was in an F1 commission with my rivals, I'd kind of be saying that. I'm like, yeah, I'd be like, guys, we're screwed. We're going to be right over. Because those other guys start thinking, well, if that is the case, do we need to be spending more? Like, are we spending less? Are they spending smarter than us? I don't know. So hard to say. And like Laurence said, until we know for sure, hard to say. But I think if you're one of the other team bosses, you're probably looking at Horner and saying, it's a bit cheeky coming from him, I think.
Why now, do you think? Why make these comments at this juncture?
Good question. I think just Horner's been doing the rounds of interviews. I mean, this is one of the things the FIA said last year, wasn't it? Was that they wanted to have those results come out earlier and be a bit more efficient in how they did that. So I'm not actually sure what the timeline is this season, but I think it's just generally, and one of Horner's points was about the way it was accounted. I think it was like a 78,000 page Excel document that Red Bull handed over. He was very critical of that. He was like, how can a team stay on top of those kind of costs and stuff like that? So, but yeah, in terms of why that's come up, other than him just being bored during the 3-week break, who knows?
I mean, the only other thing it hints at is that Red Bull have been very close or are concerned about a number of itemizations going into this year, and they want to kind of say, well, look, we're not the only ones. It's happened to everyone. But yeah, it's a really hard one to speculate on, because we had the similar situation, remember, in Singapore before we had the actual findings come out, and there was all this speculation over how many teams had overspent, how much they'd overspent. Red Bull took great offense to that. So it's kind of interesting now that they're going around saying that. But look, I mean, if it's a relatively open secret in the F1 Commission that a number of teams are on the limit, and then, of course, there's all these different ways of accounting for things. So there'll be the team's accounts, and Red Bull, when they submitted their accounts for the first year, felt that they were within it. And then there was the FIA's way of accounting, which actually meant that catering and various other things that we won't go back into now, but were documented at the time, were not part of the cost cap, and therefore they were part of the cost cap. They weren't part of the emissions, and therefore Red Bull fell foul of it. So whether it's an element of that, I don't know. I mean, it kind of, comments like that create as much speculation, don't they, as they do answers. But the good news, hopefully, if the FIA stick to their word, is that we will get some answers relatively quickly this year. I think the other thing to note is that because Max won the title and Red Bull won the title by such a big margin last year, even if they are a little bit over this year, it's not quite as big a thing as 2021, when the title was decided by essentially the last lap, and therefore every little margin, every little overspend
matters,
was arguably significant. Yeah, so I guess that's the other difference going into this. But there'll still be teams, that will look at it, and if they have rivals that have overspent, and let's say you're a team that finished 5th and the team that finished 4th has overspent, just an example, not saying they did, then you'll be upset about it, won't you? So there's plenty left in this if there's any truth to what Horner's saying.
One of my favorite things about this podcast is the difference in phrases used by Americans and Brits. Best believe pinch of salt is now being exchanged for a grain of salt over here across the pond. That, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's got to be a pinch, never
just
a grain.
A pinch, not a grain. Yeah, it doesn't even make sense, quite frankly. Pinch of salt makes so much more sense. Mind blown. Another piece of news that has hit the airwaves is Laurent Mekies is replacing Franz Tost as team boss at Red Bull's sister team, AlphaTauri. Some rumblings earlier on in the week. Nate, were we surprised by this move? I mean, Tost has been a staple there for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in there pretty much since they joined the grid, 2005. He's the only team boss they've had. He's basically, he's been tasked with overseeing, if you name a Red Bull junior that's come through, the ones that have won championships, the ones that have won races, the ones that aren't in F1 anymore, all of them that went through Toro Rosso have worked with Franz Tost at some point. So I think, it's easy to look at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso as they used to be their results and say, well, their results aren't that good. But I think, and this is the key thing, I think, in terms of him leaving, was that he clearly was someone that that Mateschitz trusted a lot. And obviously Mateschitz passed away last year. So I think in that context, it's probably not a huge surprise that somebody who was so closely linked to, to the old, the old leadership has left. There were rumblings this week. But I mean, to be honest with you, a month or so ago, when we were asking around, I mean, one of the questions in Bahrain was, are Red Bull going to sell that second team? Which is something that Red Bull denied. At that time, I remember asking somebody I know at Toro Rosso, that's me going back in time. Someone I know at AlphaTauri, what's going to happen with France? Is he going to stay in? He said, yeah, I think so. I don't think anything's going to change. They were told nothing really is going to change here. So I think it seems like stuff has obviously been going on behind the scenes. But it's going to be weird without him there because, I mean, it's crazy in a sport like Formula One that you could be in a job from 05 to 13. 2 wins to your name. I mean, I'm not, he's obviously worked in very different circumstances with a lot of bosses, but it's pretty impressive. So yeah, it was surprising to me to see that news this week and then to see it confirmed today, probably less so, but yeah, it wasn't something we were expecting.
Does this kind of change the expectations or lack thereof for AlphaTauri?
So AlphaTauri, I think, is one of the weirdest teams on the grid in that it's essentially the junior team for Red Bull and has really existed for almost all of its existence as a training ground for drivers coming through from the Red Bull Junior program, their first step into F1, and then if they cut it in AlphaTauri, previously Toro Rosso, they would get a shot at the Red Bull senior team. And so I think, Francois was really good at doing that. I think, he had this really good balance between an experienced set of, his experienced head to develop those drivers, to push them in the right direction. But at the same time, kind of managing expectations and keeping awareness. Now, they've replaced him with Laurent Mekies, who comes from Ferrari, actually was at Toro Rosso before, but has done a route via the FIA, Ferrari, and then back to Toro Rosso. And he goes in as team principal. So that's a clear progression for him from sporting director at Ferrari to a team principal at another team. I guess a bit like James Vowles going from Mercedes to Williams earlier this year. So that makes a certain amount of sense. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do. He's obviously that bit younger. He's got maybe a bit more ambition in where he's going to lead the team. But then also Peter Bayer, who comes from the FIA. He was the FIA Secretary General for Sport, was kind of very high up in the running of Formula One from the FIA side. And so I think it's always interesting when engineers or people within F1 management go from the FIA, and you've got an example of Mekies there, who's also had recent experience in the FIA, and Bayer into that team. And it'll be interesting to see what they can do and whether they can kind of, maybe just revolutionize what that team is about, what its objectives are. And while there is no suggestion that this is leading to a sale or anything like that, I guess maybe if the team's whole objective, whole ethos changes from Red Bull Junior team into its own fighting entity that is there to, try and move as far up the grid as possible, where you always felt there's a bit of a cap on AlphaTauri in that sense, then that could change it as a prospect going forward. We know how much these F1 teams are worth now, and, Red Bull will not, even if they don't intend to sell it, they will not have a problem with that team becoming a more attractive proposition for anyone looking to buy. So, it's an interesting time for that team. And hopefully it will see them progress up the grid, because this year they've had a bit of a slip as well.
That's it for legit news, which leads me to the rumors, and I'm here for them. Is Fernando Alonso the greatest troll on social media for this?
I think so. I mean, right, I'm not going to claim complete credit for that TikTok, because obviously it wasn't me who did it, but I messaged somebody at Aston Martin, and I was like, these Taylor Swift rumors are crazy. You guys have got to do something. I was like, he's got to wear a Midnight Tour t-shirt when he comes to the paddock. That was my suggestion.
Good one.
I was like, you've got to do something on TikTok. And then, lo and behold, the following morning, what do I see? Fernando Alonso. It was a good tweet. And I think that's exactly when you've got rumors like that, which from everything I can work out, and again, I'm not a showbiz reporter, so I don't have the context I should when searching for this. Doesn't seem like it's true. But this is what's great about kind of Twitter and memes and the social media world generally, is that something like this just takes on a life of its own. And I think that, had it been a race week, it probably wouldn't have really, been that big of a thing. Well, it is a race week. Had we not just had 3 weeks without a race, I don't think it would have been that big of a deal, you know what I mean? But it kind of took on life of its own. So it's good fun. And yeah, we'll see. I think the trolling is going to continue this weekend, hopefully.
Do you think, Lawrence, that he'll be asked about it in his media availability?
That's a good question. I wouldn't
want to be the reporter to ask that.
From you guys to ask.
Someone's gonna ask him.
I think because he's lent into it with the TikTok kind of video that he put up, I feel like it's now fair game. You know, it's like he's kind of into it. Therefore, you know, he's going to probably be asked about it. And yeah, we'll see where it goes from there. But it is it's entertaining if nothing else. And I completely agree with Nate. I mean, I feel like if we'd been back-to-back race weekends, this wouldn't have got a look in. But now it's kind of all everyone's talking to. Yeah. But only because it would just be so amazing if it was true, because it's, well, unbelievable for kind of obvious reasons.
I've forgotten the name of the person on TikTok, but somebody has written a song as if they were Taylor Swift about Fernando Alonso. You know, often when she, you know, splits up in a relationship.
That's why if this is remotely an inkling true, he needs to tread lightly, because if it doesn't work out, which most of her relationships do not, you then become the focal point of a new hit song. Yeah,
and some of them are pretty savage. You know, not all of them, but some of them are pretty awful. So yeah. But then again, I don't think she's probably dated anyone as famous as him, right? So maybe an actor or two, I don't know.
John Mayer, maybe, I think would be.
Oh yeah. Well, he's no Fernando Alonso, is he?
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Definitely doesn't have the personality of Fernando Alonso. All right, that's it for the rumors. We have something special for this episode of Unlapped, with the NFL draft obviously taking place Thursday ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We're going to do our own Unlapped draft. So here's the scenario. And Lawrence, I don't think you're going to like it, but we are going to draft driver number 1, driver number 2, reserve driver, team boss, and then the team brand that you would like to associate with. Before you logged on from Baku, I populated it random, used the internet. Nate gets the first overall selection. I get the second. You get the third. And I swear to God, that is how it went. And this is a snake draft. So third is not so bad because you get to pick back to back. How do you feel?
That's fair. I was late for this podcast. I got stuck in Baku traffic after dinner. So I can.
It really did happen that way. I want that noted.
You did. Yeah, I can guarantee.
I have 100% of myself.
Well,
go for it.
I have my big board ready. Don't know if you two came prepared or if you're just going to do this off the cuff. Nate, in no particular order, fill your spots, my friend.
Okay, so I think there's only really one person you can pick. Number 1, that's got to be Max Verstappen. You know, he's the guy at the moment. You know, he's got age on his side. He's got talent. I think you build a team around him. So I'm going Max, number 1.
Okay, strong choice. Nobody's surprised.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's the problem with the first pick, isn't it? In real life and in more important drafts like this one, is that first pick you're kind of locked into one person, so it's less fun.
It's very true. Okay, I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton with my number 2 pick overall.
Nice.
Laz?
So, because I now have 2 picks, right? We're doing a snake draft. It's going back to me. So I'm going to pick Fernando Alonso, mainly because, you know, he's just this meme machine as well. So I feel like from a marketing side of my team, they're going to be pleased with him. But of course, he is a mega driver. So Fernando Alonso, and then I'm going to go with a bit of youth with George Russell.
I knew Lawrence would go George Russell. I mean, it's a good pick, but I
Strong pick.
I even, as soon as you said I'd be first, Katie, I was like, well, Russell's not going to be available coming back to me because he's got to go through Lawrence twice. So
No. Okay, so based on, well, I'm actually not going to talk myself into this because then you might steal what I'm thinking. I've got plans. Okay, gentlemen. With my number 2, my second pick in the draft, I'm going to take Charles Leclerc and believe that he will be error free, depending on the car that I give him.
A good choice.
That is a good choice. Kind of, I was hoping you'd err on the side of not going for Charles, but never mind. I'm going to take Lando. I want to get the Gen Zers on board, and I'm going to free him from his current situation at McLaren. He can come race at Saunders F1. Can't guarantee we'll be any better, but he can wear a different overall. And then this is where I'm struggling because So now my third pick coming back to me right on this. I'm trying to work out team boss versus do you want a really competitive reserve driver? I feel like there'll be enough reserve drivers left, when you come back. So I'm going to pick, and this is difficult, but I'm going to pick Gunther Steiner because why wouldn't you? Yeah,
why wouldn't you?
I'd love to see him leading to like drivers like Norris and Verstappen. I think that alone would be hilarious. But now I've got Steiner, Verstappen, and Norris in a team, which could either be a match made in heaven or could just be the worst idea anyone's ever had. So let's see how that goes.
What do you think the interactions would be between Gunther Steiner and Max Verstappen if they were working together on the same team?
I think there'd be a lot of doors off their hinges. I think there'd be a lot of walls smashed. I think there'd be chairs flying around because it's not just Max as well. It would be Raymond, his manager, Max's manager, and Jos, his dad. That there's a lot of energy in that room. So maybe, and then Lando would be in the corner, just kind of on Twitter or something, calming everyone down. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Maybe I went too early on Steiner. I don't know. Let's see how you guys pick.
Okay. I think it's a bold choice. I'm with it. He was in my top 3 for managers, so I think you nailed it. I'm going to go with the reserve driver, and I'm going to go with the driver that has the 4th most wins on the grid currently, and that is Valtteri Bottas.
Nice.
So back to 2 picks so I can fill my reserve driver. Well, and team. So sorry, I'm a bit new to this. So team brand. I mean, that's just the team in general, right? I mean, that seems like quite a valuable thing, as in the people that are making the car that are going to make it go fast. So I'm definitely picking Red Bull because I don't care who you put at the top of that organization. It's already so good that it's going to produce one hell of a car. And with that, I get Honda engines until 2025 as well. So that's pretty good going.
Did we miss there then, Nate? Should we have gone?
Maybe I'm thinking that's a good pick.
No,
I mean Steiner's more valuable than the entire Red Bull organization, isn't he? Maybe.
I just saw it hanging there. I was like, wait a minute, I don't even know why I went for drivers first.
Why did I go with the reserve driver? I botched this. Okay, who's your 4th pick?
So and then I'm going to put Toto Wolff in charge of the Red Bull team, which I mean, in real life, it's never going to happen. But can you imagine? I mean, a man with amazing business acumen. Let's say he's got some shares in Red Bull, like he does with Mercedes, to give him a bit of skin in the game. I think that's a pretty great prospect because I've got now Adrian Newey and Toto Wolff and George Russell and Fernando Alonso. I'm feeling pretty confident.
It's pretty
but
good.
No results yet, so I might fall slip up on that one.
Okay, to be fair, your team is looking. Your team is looking the best right now. If I had to objectively decide. Okay, for my 4th pick, just because this would never happen, but could you imagine if it did? I will take Christian Horner to be the team boss of Lewis Hamilton.
Oh wow, this is a complete mess. I like it.
It's a mess. It's a mess. Okay, you get 2 picks, Nate, to round this
I
off.
left a lot of really good picks on the table there, didn't I? All forgot. I could have still had Steiner. I don't know what I panicked. So I get 2. So I think, I mean, I was going to say Ferrari for brand, but I don't actually think I don't think I do want anything to do with Ferrari. I'm going to pick Mercedes. Lawrence has picked Red Bull. I think Mercedes still, they've gone through their troubles, but they're such an impressive team. Like with Red Bull, the 2 of them are just at the moment synonymous with winning. So, they've got that structure in place, and I think that they're just a fantastic organization. So I take them as the brand, and I've still got reserve driver, haven't I, to pick. So I think I would put. Well, I've got my list here, but actually, you know what? I'm going to do it. Danny Rick, friend of the podcast. Danny Rick right in there.
I was hoping to be left at the end.
I feel like that was a heart decision, maybe not a head decision.
It was heart. Well, it was heart and head, but I was looking as well, and I was like, "There's 2 guys, who are on the grid and have won races, but we haven't picked them. But it's fine."
Okay, so I have to pick my team brand, and obviously there's not much more iconic than the Ferrari red. I don't know if it's good for Charles Leclerc to remain in red. And I also now am contemplating, did I just bring bad juju onto my team? with this selection, but I just don't think that I can go against Ferrari. Hopefully Christian Horner would get to the bottom of the reliability issues as team boss and wouldn't stand for it. So
you've got Hamilton, Horner, Ferrari, and
Charles,
Leclerc, and Charles,
and Valtteri as a reserve. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So with your fifth and final pick, Laurence, you need your reserve driver as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go. This is probably a risky choice, actually, but I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri because he's young. But I'm going to make sure the contract is watertight. So unlike Alpine, neither of you can steal him towards the end of this year.
Wise.
So yeah, as long as I've got a watertight contract, I'm going with Oscar Piastri because I think even though this year obviously hasn't shown too much yet, I think he's got a huge amount of potential going forward.
Okay.
Well, none of us drafted Zach Brown on McLaren, so Piastri should be safe, you would think, but who knows?
Here's how it stands and comes out. Nate, you have Max Verstappen and Lando Norris driving for Mercedes with Gunther Steiner at the helm and Daniel Ricciardo in the wings as your reserve driver. I have Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc on track with Christian Horner leading Ferrari with Valtteri Bottas as the reserve driver. Laurence, you have Fernando Alonso and George Russell on track in Red Bulls with Toto Wolff in the garage with Oscar Piastri standing by his side. David Presley.
All of those are great. All of
they
those
are great.
Very,
very different, but very good. David Presley, voice of God. Who do you think won our unlapped draft?
Oh my goodness. I mean, Laurence, can you really go against Toto, Red Bull, George, and Alonso? That's so stacked. And then Piastri. I do wish I'd made the rules that you had to pick a rookie for your reserve driver. That I think would have spiced things up. But we can't go back now. Yeah. I hate to say it, but I'm gonna go Laurence 1, Katie 2, Nate 3. Sorry, Nate.
Oh no. So again, it shows you the draft order. It's a curse. Number 1 is a curse.
The last man to the pod drafts the best. Preparation not needed.
Katie does have Ferrari, which at the end of the day, based on the track record of the past how many years, you're going to struggle.
I'm surprised you didn't take Aston. You could have had the Stroll money with that team. You know,
I know, but owners weren't involved. Owners weren't necessarily a consideration.
Oh, true.
I more so went for the look, and I would
have jumped in with him like, well, if you're going to take Aston, you have to take Stroll because they go hand in hand.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it? It's 2 picks, not 1.
Lance, yeah, you get Lance with him.
And also Ferrari, you get Maranello, Northern Italy, great food, great wine. So even if it goes wrong, you're still happy, right?
Exactly. Thank you. That was my thought. Carbs and wine, always.
At the end of the day, you're all super rich because you now all own an F1 team. So
like, be very nice.
Or super broke, depending on how it goes, but.
Thanks for playing my game. I appreciate it. Obviously, the NFL draft you can watch on ESPN and ABC all throughout the weekend as you get into F1 as well. Let's discuss the Baku Grand Prix, shall we? Can I call it that, or is it only Azerbaijan Grand Prix? And then you can say racing in Baku. What would be?
We say Baku GP. Well, I mean, it's not officially the title, but
yeah, officially it's Azerbaijan, but everyone knows
what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Christian Horner has said he's worried about carnage because we've obviously got the sprint format that we discussed at the top of the show. Are we expecting carnage? Where would we set the over-under of safety cars? What's the expectation, Laurence, for this Grand Prix?
I feel like there is going to be carnage just because we have that extra sprint race on top of a normal race at a track that traditionally does just throw up some curveballs. But like I said before, it often just needs that little thing, either somebody clipping a barrier, 2 drivers getting together, a tire failure. We've had all those things in the past. The one thing we've never had here is rain, and there is a bit of rain in the air for Sunday as well. So imagine Baku wet. I mean, that's going to be crazy. So I feel like, yes, there is potential for carnage. And also just because Christian Horner said that it's going to be that it's, you know, a ludicrous place to host a sprint race. I feel like that's just inviting it. It's just inviting it for the drivers to go crazy. And also they've had a little bit of time off, so they might be a little bit rusty going back into it. A few points to prove. some real desire to get back out there racing. And it doesn't take much for a misjudged overtaking maneuver or going into a corner a little bit too hot to turn into a big accident in Baku. So I feel like it's going to be an exciting weekend.
We obviously expect Red Bull to stay at the top, but there's a lot of teams that are bringing upgrades, Nate. So who maybe are you most interested to see on track in the way that they, attack this weekend?
I think the two big teams everyone's going to be looking at are Mercedes and Ferrari. We know Red Bull is so far ahead. Mercedes, have come into this weekend, and we'll probably talk about it in a bit, with James Allison coming back, been a bit of a reshuffle behind the scenes, which we didn't think was that surprising. But this 3-week spell, the thing we've been hearing is that this is the perfect time for them all to develop. And obviously Mercedes were in a bit of a hole at the start of the year. You would think that they, I know they've targeted for after Baku for like their big upgrades, but they're all working on their cars. So I think Mercedes and Ferrari are the two teams personally I want to see make a step forward. I'm also quite curious to see whether Aston Martin, we've seen before in the past that teams have started really, really well and they've kind of dropped back. And I wonder whether Aston are going to do that or whether they are actually going to stay out in front. So I think there's a few teams we're looking at, but I think we'll be looking at the back of the Red Bull. The Red Bull's not going to be on the broadcast too much.
What teams and drivers does this track favor, do you think, Laurence?
It's a good question. I feel like we haven't yet got to a place where we can really predict that. I mean, I made some incorrect predictions at previous races based on what we saw in Bahrain and so on. I think the one thing we can say is that Red Bull are going to be ahead. This is a track that will suit the Red Bull, I think. There's those long DRS section as well. We know how powerful the DRS is on the Red Bull. So I feel like that should go quite well. I'm kind of inclined to think that the Mercedes will make a decent show of it here. Aston Martin, maybe not so much. I think they're more into really high downforce circuits. This is going to be a relatively low downforce circuit just because of those long straights. And then the team, I think, really to keep an eye on actually is McLaren, just because they've been promising a big upgrade for Baku since the start of the year. This is almost like their day zero for their 2023 season, just because they made such a bad start. They recognized their mistakes even before a wheel was turned in testing, and they looked to Baku to change some of the things on the car fundamentally. Mainly the floor, I think, is what's going to change to increase the aerodynamic efficiency of the car, so they get downforce in the corners as well as good straight line speed. So that'll be my team to watch from the midfield. But we've had 3 races so far. It feels like we've had more because this season is several weeks older without a race recently. But I think it's still really hard to determine who's going to suit which track. And I think the teams are learning so much about these cars that each race is changing slightly. The only guarantee we have pretty much is that Red Bull, unless something goes wrong, will be at the front of the field.
You guys have obviously told us about some of your favorite tracks and Grand Prix in the past. How does this one stack up against the rest?
I really like it. I'm not sure I'd put it in top 5, but I'm always struggled to put a top 5 together when put on the spot. But I think Baku is one of the strongest circuits there. I mean, it's got a track record of having some really good races, and it's kind of like 2 different circuits in one. You've got that long back straight, and then you've got that really tight, twisty bit in the middle of the circuit. So it's a challenging circuit for qualifying. We see drivers make mistakes there all the time. Also during the race, that long straight should create overtaking opportunities is the aim. I do think it's impressive as well that it stayed a circuit I think is one that I like, because the only time I've covered it as a journalist was about 7 days after I completely tore my ankle ligaments playing 5-a-side football. And Laurence will tell you the only way into the Baku paddock is at the very end of the paddock, and the media center is at the very top. It's that big hotel. I had these crutches and this boot, and it was really hot, really, really hot. And I just spent the entire week coming in from this hotel, struggling my way all the way to the top and struggling down for media sessions. I think Danny Rick at one point even kind of made a joke about it. He was like, I keep seeing you struggling in and no one's helping you. I was like, yeah, well, this is what's happened. So even with that memory, it's still something I like. It's still a place I like to watch. So yeah, I'd give it, if we're giving it a grade, maybe a B minus. I think that's pretty good.
Do you agree, Laurence?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's not quite the top echelon, because you do have the occasional dull race. Mind you, that's true pretty much everywhere, isn't it? But yeah, it's just unique, and I think that's why it's such an enjoyable race weekend every time, because we do have other street circuits, but none of them are quite like Baku. None of them go around a UNESCO heritage castle wall midway through the lap, which looks cool, but perhaps isn't so great for the racing, but it's there, and they have to deal with it. So I think stuff like that makes it cool. You get ridiculous wind going around this place. The kind of the buildings, obviously they're quite tall buildings here in a city. They kind of channel the wind through various different bits, and we know from watching Formula One that the cars are very sensitive to that. Of course, they're so reliant on their aerodynamic performance. So as soon as you have this crosswind coming across them, you get mistakes, you get errors, and the other thing is it's often this time of year, so it kind of alternates between being early in the year around now and June. And when it's June, it's warm and everything. But when it gets to this time of year and they hold the race in the late spring, the drivers really struggle to get the tires up to temperature, and that can be such a big thing. So having a few tricks up your sleeve from an engineering side and from a driver tire warm-up point of view can be crucial here as well. So there's so many different facets going on that you do get exciting races as a result of that.
Laurence mentioned his poor predictions, I think is the verbiage that he used, from the past, which means we are obviously going to now give our predictions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. This is where we currently stand, and I know it gets a little wonky because I joined late. Nate, I believe you have 2 wins and a tie, a draw, okay? Laurence, you have 1 draw and 2 losses, and I have a draw currently. I think that's right. I'm going to double check my math, obviously, when we get off this, and I'll have a new leaderboard when we redeem and get back next week. But as it stands for this weekend, who are you guys picking and why? Who wants to start?
Nate, I feel like it's your honor. I mean, I didn't realize you were winning by such a big margin, but
well, I feel like after the draft picks, I can only really mess this up. So let's go for it.
Yeah.
Obviously, by this point, we will just put Max at number 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say Max first. I agree with Laurence. I think Mercedes is going to have a good one. So I'm going to put Lewis in second, and I'm going to put Russell third. I think Mercedes come back with a bang. Sorry to Checo fans, but that's for the race, right? I don't think any of us can predict the sprint. That would be wild. And
you just think Alonso on podium, just too distracted with his new beau?
I think he's going to be trying too hard to impress his new girlfriend, and
sure. Okay.
and I think he'll be playing the songs in his head. It's me, hi, and then he'll be going to turn 1 and he'll lock up, miss a win. You never see Fernando Alonso make a mistake. If Fernando Alonso makes a mistake this weekend, by the way, we can officially blame Taylor Swift, because he never makes a mistake. He never makes a mistake. So even if the rumors aren't true, if he makes a mistake, it's on you, Taylor.
It's on Taylor and the Swifties. Laurence, who are you picking?
So I'm a bit torn, because I think I'm right in saying that every Azerbaijan Grand Prix has had a different winner. So if I choose Max Verstappen, that run comes to an end. And I really like that about this race. It's one of the really cool things about it. But it would also mean I'd have to choose either Fernando Alonso or George Russell to win. And I can't quite bring myself to do it. But what I'm going to do is say Max Verstappen wins, because I guess we all just say that nowadays. George Russell comes second. And because I've yet to do it, and it's what's cost me the most victories, Fernando Alonso in third.
Yeah, this is the first one I've not done Fernando in third, so we'll see how it goes.
What is it? The match that broke the camel's back? Is that
straw.
The saying?
The straw.
Straw.
Yeah.
No, I think in both countries, just so we're clear, it's the straw.
Oh, it is the straw.
I was about to say, if that's the match sounds great. Why don't we use that?
Now I'm just making up phrases. Okay. Dang you, Laurence, because I was going to go Max, George, but because you went Fernando, I'm actually going to put Sergio Perez on the podium, P3.
Perez is a good choice. He is good at street circuits, and he has won.
Yeah. So that gives us a little bit of a difference there to see who's going to come out on top. So there you have it. Those are our predictions. We'll check back, obviously, after the weekend. Laurence, I wish you well. I hope you have so much fun. We can't wait to see and read your coverage. Nate, we'll see you in Miami next week. I can't believe it's already here. As always, thank you guys so much for your analysis and your time. We'll be back next week for more on Unlapped. Cheers.